Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so honored and delighted to have you. Welcome to the Latino Heritage Month 2022 Speaker Series. We are so excited to have you here and really appreciate your time. Before we begin, I just want to tell you a little bit about our Center for Global Partnerships and Learning that is in partnership with Pepperdine's very own Graduate School of Education and Psychology. So the CG4PL, Center for Global Partnerships and Learning, offers a wide range of programs toward the advancement of student scholarship. We serve as a gateway for students and alumni to be able to develop their skills, elevate their voices, and develop their research acumen. Our focus is in the following 4 areas: Scholarship Without Borders Journal, collaborative research opportunities, certificates, workshops, and seminars, and of course, publication and conference presentation support year-round. With the respective support and collaboration of our Associate Dean's Office in the Education Division, our programs and opportunities, we truly do strive to enhance the student experience and ensure that our students can have access and support in furthering their academic scholarly activity. And today, I'm honored to have a fireside chat with all of you, where we'll hear our very own distinguished Dr. Ricardo Vigil talk about his story, and then we'll open it up for your respective questions. And for Dr. Vigil's respective bio, he is the Director of Field Experience for the Teacher Prep Program here at GSEP. Previously, Dr. Vigil was a secondary instructor and administrator. Dr. Vigil uses his background and knowledge of K through 12 education to develop and maintain partnerships with schools and organizations in the greater Southern California area. He enjoys guiding and developing new educators as they journey through their programs and into their respective careers. Dr. Vigil's research interests include technology, teacher feedback, and instruction, and he is a very passionate supporter of STEM, urban education, and innovative schools. Please join me in welcoming our very own Dr. Ricardo Vigil, Lessons Learned by a Latino from Inglewood. Dr. Vigil, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonia, and I definitely appreciate the introduction. That was a lot. I don't feel that accomplished, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides, and I want to thank everybody who took the time to be here. I do appreciate it. I was talking to Dr. Sonia just a little bit before everybody jumped in, and I was like, I don't know if I have that much to say, and I can fill up the time, but I do hope that my journey is something that someone can relate to, and you know, I do hope that it's something that can help folks, and I think that that's really what the spirit of this is all about. So I wanted to just give a little bit about my talking points. I want to just talk a little bit about who I am, how I grew up. I put some bullet points there about traveling, learning, teaching, family, fatherhood, and then sort of what's next. So I'll just go through that process. And again, if there are any thoughts or questions, I'm certainly open to hearing from things. But I did want to start by thanking Dr. Miramontes and Dr. Ghazi and Dr. Sonia for this opportunity. I will say that I did it with a little trepidation, and that's a lot because I have a hard time sometimes just thinking about, like, talking about myself and thinking, like, really, like, what do I have to offer, and what do I have to talk to in a room full of such accomplished people. But you know, one of my favorite parables from the Bible and just religion in general is there's a quote that says, you know, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So like I said, I did this with a little trepidation, but I think it's also something that I want to thank Dr. Miramontes for kind of pushing me and helping me to do this, because I also am very proud, of what I've done and what I've able to accomplish. And you know, being someone who is Latino, being someone who whose family is from El Salvador, and also being amongst that group, very finite group of individuals who are Latino who have a doctoral degree, you know, is something that is special to me, and is something that I am definitely proud of. So so the opportunity is certainly one that is welcomed. So thank you for that. And I'm here to, you know, just really talk about my journey, and coming from a place where I am, you know, a person who grew up in the city of Inglewood as you know, in the same house that I grew up in. I'm still living here with my wife and my family now. And it's been an interesting journey, just kind of putting together some of the things over this weekend. It was just interesting to um, see where my life has been and where its journey has been, and where I'm going. And I think I'm very excited about sharing that with folks. And so thank you for that opportunity. So I grew up in Inglewood, as I mentioned, and I put some images here to sort of help me uh, try to give folks a better sense of who I am and what I'm about. And I think really my point today is talking, you know, Latino Heritage Month, and really kind of figuring myself out is just kind of this journey of discovery for me. And I like using that word because it's been an interesting journey. But I got to start at the beginning, right where I grew up. So I'm from Inglewood, born here in Los Angeles. You know, definitely my early years have all been here in LA. I was born in, I think I was born in Hollywood, if I'm not mistaken, Queen of Angels Hospital that doesn't exist anymore. But you know, I put the image of Taco Bell as well there because my it's an interesting Taco Bell on 60th and Crenshaw, which is close to where I live. And this Taco Bell is noted for a couple of reasons. One, it burned down during the riots in the early 90s. And it's back, and it's back in its all in all its glory. But that's my neighborhood. So I grew up in the crossroads. Like my street is actually half Inglewood, half Los Angeles. And at that school, that's where I went to school. And currently there's a new school there that we are working with, and we're partnering this year in our Pepperdine Masters in Teaching program. And so that Taco Bell just is kind of like a reminder for me of that early part. But I also put in the image here of curtains closed. And I found that interesting as I was kind of putting this presentation together because, uh, you know, growing up with my parents and my sister, we're a family of four. And it was just, it's one of those things where you just grow up, and I didn't have any background. I didn't know, you know, what my parents were doing and why they were doing things. And it's sort of this idea that, you know, you don't know you're learning, but you're learning. And so I put the curtains closed because it couldn't quite pull back the curtains just yet. And I will share, my mom recently passed away not too long ago. But one of the things that, and I mentioned that because we were going through some of her things back at her house, and what we got was a lot of pictures. And what I noticed was a lot of pictures of family, and a lot of cousins, and a lot of you know, folks that I know who they are, I just haven't connected in a while. But it really made me think that one, about family being such an incredibly important thing, but also not recognizing when I was younger just how important that was, right? And that aspect of my journey was. But my parents did it, right? And my parents definitely connected with all of my cousins, many of which whom I connect with now. And I'll talk about why a little bit later. But you know, I didn't know that. I didn't know growing up, like seeing those pictures at my mom's place was something that was incredibly enlightening, and also just like recognizing, oh, my parents really went out of their way to connect us, right? And to connect us with family, to make sure that we had that connection with folks who are really going to guide us in our life. So that was, you know, a little bit about me. But I also want to note that my parents were Catholic missionaries. And so growing up, we did a lot of traveling. So my parents were folks who sort of went out and visited different parishes, different dioceses across the United States. And this allowed us to really get some interesting experiences in regards to my own life. And lived in New York for a little bit, lived in San Francisco, that's a picture of San Antonio in the Riverwalk, and Fresno, Arizona was another place. And again, this led to a few things. And when I think about my journey as a Latino, particularly growing up, one of the things that comes to mind is self-awareness. And I think traveling definitely makes you self-aware. You're always the new person, right, when you are traveling. And so to put some context, we would travel for 2 or 3 months in the year where my parents would pull me out of my school back in LA and Inglewood. And I would have to, a fuerzas go to a school in other places in the country. And of course that led to this experience where I was, very self-aware of who I was at an early age, and understanding that I'm the new person and I have to make friends. But there's also a lot of value in that experience, and one of them is that itself is experiences. I really felt that it made me appreciate experiences. And I think that's something that I carry with me to this day. And it also made me appreciate understanding who you are and understanding different cultures, right? And although we're all American, right, in some sense, but living in New York and living in San Francisco and San Antonio and Phoenix are different places, and just having to encounter the different types of folks that live there was something that was always very enlightening to me, but also always made me ask the question of how do I fit in? Right. And how do I get myself to fit in? And I mentioned self-awareness because, again, back then I don't think I had this like self-awareness of, oh, I'm a Latino going into these areas. I think not think I know that I really latched onto this idea of, well, I'm an American, right? And that's something that I can relate to, and very much like I'm American. And this idea sort of formed during this time, right, where I felt very much like um, this was my time to really experience who I was. I went to San Francisco. In fact, I went to high school in San Francisco. At some point, that became sort of our permanent base for my parents when they were doing their work. And so high school was all in San Francisco, and it was a juxtaposition to my life in Inglewood and growing up in my school here, home, where at least at that point it was predominantly a Black school. It was, maybe 80% Black and 10%, 20% Latino. And that's one way of experiencing life and culture. And then going to San Francisco, where it was probably the majority were white, probably Asian, and a very small minority being either Black or Latino. And that was such a interesting thing. And I mentioned that because it's sort of, I latched onto this idea uh, of sort of like well, let me work hard at school, right? And if I work hard at school, I can be something and I can fit in, and that's going to be my thing. And I've even put up an American flag here because that's sort of what I latched onto. I really thought, okay, well, that's going to be my identity. And my parents came here to this country, and they gave me this opportunity. They gave us, my sister and I, this opportunity. And so let me take advantage of it and like make the best of it. But in thinking back on it now, I also noticed that I was becoming very this was my time where it was like very American, and I wasn't like Latino like Ricardo, right? It was just like I'm the American Ricardo, and this is what I do. I wasn't, thinking about my roots or Spanish music or the Spanish culture and arts and things of that nature. Like it really was, let me because this is where I grew up, so let me identify and sort of cue in on that. And I mentioned that because it is very formative for my time, and I've created this sort of sense of like um, almost arrogance, I want to call it, right? Where it's like, well, let me let me be this, and I think if I can do it, everybody else can do it, and that's how I'm going to sort of progress. And so, anyways, I also went to college up in the Bay Area, in Santa Clara, and that in itself was also very um, self-aware. It made me more self-aware. So I think that sort of that was the next evolution for me, was just going off to college and sort of recognizing like, okay, well, I had this experience where, I wanted to, like I said, kind of make the American dream happen in all of this. And got to school. I got to my college, and I put a picture here of like sort of a reveal. And because what really started to happen was that real life started to get revealed for me. And again, just sort of recognizing who I was in a place where, again, I was Latino who was in a minority, right? And even though I saw myself as American, but I started to recognize what other folks saw me as, right? And I wasn't white, and I wasn't, in that sort of culture that was there. I definitely knew what I was, and so this place was an understanding of where I was, and it was also revealing to me, sort of learning about the cultural capital that I didn't have in this world, and understanding like I have this sort of, and I put a puzzle piece here, puzzle pieces. I had this like notion of what I thought the world was, and the way I grew up with it, and I started to realize like, oh, I was sort of isolated. I was in a bubble when I was in high school, and now this real world's presented to me, and it's not what I thought it was. And so that was sort of my first interesting thing. And I would also mention too that it wasn't any coincidence that both in high school and in college, like I ended up gravitating towards what I knew, and I hung out with a lot of Latinos, right? And I hung out with a lot of folks who were similar to me and who spoke like me, and we shared common things, and that was very often my experience. But both in places that were definitely minority, and we were definitely um, trying to navigate a system that wasn't ours, right? And we did it, and we managed it, but it was definitely very revealing. And my time in college and sort of learning was that time period for me where I was definitely trying to hold true to like this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to work hard and study and do all the things I'm supposed to do, because to put it bluntly, like that's what the white people wanted me to do, right? And that's what America wanted me to do. And this was a time where that's finally started to get chipped away a little bit, right? And I started to recognize my place in this world, and the importance of what I was doing, even though it wasn't my system. It was still a place for me to grow under. And so yeah, so I was able to finish college, and ultimately I joined Pepperdine. After a little bit of time in the workforce, I was a someone who really enjoyed coaching and enjoyed education, and I was sort of fighting the call to be an educator and to be a teacher. But my godmother, who lives in LA, and she worked for LASD for 40 years or so, and she kept telling me and I kept fighting it and fighting it, and finally it just happened. And I think I think I got fired at a job, and that's something I actually wasn't even thinking about till now, but I got fired at a job uh for for sort of like not fitting within the system, and trying to speak up. And I think it was a good transition, because this was an opportunity. What, let me uh let me follow this calling. So I became a teacher, and I think that was the next sort of evolution in my life and in my journey, was just understanding that now I was had this opportunity to help shape and guide individuals who I didn't know it at the time. Even when I started, I think I was 24 when I finished my master's degree at Pepperdine, and here I was teaching in Lenox, California, right, which is now we're talking flip side. We're 99% Latino, heavily Mexican, a few Central American countries sprinkled here, but it's definitely a Latino culture. And it was interesting though, because when I started teaching, I was not like Mr. Pro Latino, like, I had come with this American mindset of, hey, I went to school, I worked hard, And then I went to college, and if you guys do this, and you guys can do it too, right? If I did it, you guys can do it too. And I what I didn't really have was a sense of still understanding of where I fit with all this. And I was coming in as straight like Mr. America, right? Like kind of Captain America waving that flag. And uh, what was enlightening to me during this time period, though, were, of course, when you teach, you're teaching people, you're teaching humans, and it's the stories. And I put a book here, and it's the stories that you learn from students, and just each of their journeys being so different, and all the things that they had to teach me, right? Not that I was teaching them, and I was teaching world history, and that was great, but I also started to recognize, like, I'm learning a lot from these students, right? And that what they were offering me to my life. And I thought that was interesting, because in many ways I felt like these students were, I looked like them, and I was from Inglewood, and it was not far from Lenox, and here was my journey, but I always felt like, well, they're me, but they're not me. And I thought, well, what's wrong here? What I started to realize, though, was that not all the pathways were the same, right? And I put a picture here of kind of this curvy road, because what teaching helped me recognize in my journey was that not everyone has to have the same journey that I had, right? And even though I had my particular experience, and I was holding on to this notion of what my world was, and how I deemed quote unquote success and not and whatnot. I recognize that for many of the students I was teaching, that wasn't the path. And not only that, but I had a lot of good, I had a lot of good fortune in my life with my parents, and what they did for me, and the sacrifices that they made for me. And I was recognizing the sacrifices that their parents were making for my students, and just kind of really kind of experiencing that, and seeing that not everyone's pathway is the same. And this started to finally chip away at that notion I had, of, well, go to college, go to school, and you can do this too. And I started to realize that, well, there's also other things in life that are a lot more important. And yes, this is important, and yes, I will always push you to be successful, but I put a picture of shattered glass, because that American dream started to finally get cracked, and started to recognize, like what's going on here, because I was sold this story, but the reality on the ground in Lenox when I was teaching was a different one, right? And it it was not as easy as, yeah, just go to college and everything will be great. Like, no, there was so many hardships, so many things that people were experiencing, and so many things that my students were experiencing, that wasn't always the case. And the last image I have there is of these folks jumping. It was actually a very joyful time. I always tell my current students, I work in the Masters in Teaching program with Dr. Garcia Ramos, who in the MAT program, who's here right now, and we teach future teachers. And one of the things I always tell them is that I think those 9-10 years of teaching were some of the most incredible, joyful experiences. It's such a wonderful gift to be able to teach others, and I think doing that really helped teach me, and I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about recognizing that I had sort of built this like protective wall barrier, like growing up, where because of traveling and always being a new student, I was like, well, let me just kind of assimilate, right? Let me just be, again, to put it bluntly, like a white student, and let me just live the American dream, do everything I'm supposed to do it the right way, go to school. And I started to recognize, like, wait, there's something that's missing. And these students helped bring that back in many ways, like, and just recognizing the language and things of that nature were really something that were important. And so that was a big part of my journey. I will also, I'd be remiss not to note, the huge impact. And boy, it feels like a long time ago, but 2016, 2015, 16, when the world changed a bit, right? Like we had this this movement, with this populist movement, obviously a lot of Trump stuff, social media, the dangers of social media, and sort of the algorithm and that sort of stuff. And I really started to also get a sense in 2016 that, boy, the world's changing. And it's changing in many ways. And what I recognized was that, um, again, it was sort of peeling back this layer of who you are and where you fit in this world. And I started to really recognize that there was a need for critical thinking. There's a need for discussion. And I think that was one aspect of, I think we're still going through this in many ways. When we think about how social media has shaped the world now, and how you can live in your own bubble within your own algorithm in your social media world today, there is a need for discussion and critical thinking and all of this. But I think what also happened to me at this time, we're beyond the populist movement that was happening, was this discovery of being a dad for the first time, and recognizing that there was this really ugly layer that was peeled back. And I hadn't seen that before in this world. I always kind of felt like, well, you know racism of course exists and it's there, but people are kind enough to at least make the effort and try. And that sort of went away, like, right, like this sort of thing was revealed in the last few years. And we're in an interesting place now. So I'd be remiss not to mention it, because I think it was an age of discovery for me, and it's recognizing who I am and the experiences and what I could bring. And overall, I think that was one of the bigger, I think, finally, like, not beyond teaching, and later on I moved into administration. It was close to this time where I actually joined Pepperdine, and I had a good sense of what I wanted to be. And little things. And again, I mentioned Dr. Garcia Ramos here, but like, I'd gone as Vigil. Sorry, I'd gone as Vigil, like almost like my whole life. Like I was Mr. Vigil, or later Dr. Vigil, right? And Dr. Garcia Ramos would call me Dr. Vigil. And when I got to Pepperdine, that was I recognized, like, not only is that correct, but that's my name. That it's always been my name. It's always been Vigil. Uh, but again, to fit in, right? Like, let me call myself Vigil, because it's easier for people, and that's sort of the experience that they'll have. And so, again, these shifts start to happen, and I was very appreciative of just being able to sort of be free, and, like, what, I am Vigil. It's a very common name from El Salvador, and that's how you pronounce it. And these little things started to happen in my life. And I think, obviously, having children, and I'll mention my family now. I'm married. We have two wonderful boys who they're actually older than this now, but I don't have any newer pictures because I'm terrible at that stuff. But they're 6 years old and 4 years old, and we have another on the way, another boy. So we'll be a family of boys that we're expecting. And of course, as some of you might know, having children um, creates this new space for you. And my wife and I were always like, well, we have these little brown kids, and we know, we're so conscious of that. We know, like, these little brown kids, and how do we help them and navigate them in this world, right? And there's a lot that I think about my journey, and things that my parents did for me. Again, like, the curtain finally was pulled back. Like, I get, like, why my parents did what they did. I get why hanging out with family is important. I get why a lot of the things that we do in life is important. And I mentioned here, like, culture became incredibly something that it wasn't just a thing, but it was something that was passed down, right? And I put here, carne asadas that you have with your family, music, entertainment. But I also was extremely just happy that I could do it in two languages, right? And not only could I enjoy whatever I loved about English and popular culture, but I could also do that in Spanish. And just being able to have that experience. And sometimes I watch my wife and I will watch Bollywood movies, and we watch a lot of Indian music videos. They're interesting. You should take a look if you like them. But what's interesting is that we don't understand the language, and I always thought, man, if we just understood the language, it's this opening to culture. And I recognized very much how important Spanish was for our family, and recognizing we need to speak to our children in Spanish, and it's not the language, it's the culture that it opened up, right? And the ability to have my kids identify with who they were, and things that we would be a part of and watch. And and I'm very grateful for that. Like we just recently started watching this Vicente Fernandez documentary. It's like, I don't know, it's a documentary, it's more like a novela, but it's 36 episodes and we're 10 episodes in. But I love it. Like, and I love that it's something that I can watch and that we can connect to, and we can share that music with our kids. And it's just this really wonderful thing that we've experienced with our children, is that yes, there's a sense of being American, and we have that. And English is ultimately our first language, but we've got this foundation, this other underlying thing that really makes us who we are. And I and I guess kind of tying it back to GSEP, like I remember sitting, I think I can't remember, it was some education meeting that we had maybe a couple years ago, but I was sitting in a room with an individual from GSEP who um, was Korean but grew up in China. Another individual who was Asian American but grew up in Thailand, and a person from England, a British person. And just all thinking, like, we sat there and we all identified as American, but completely different, like, backgrounds, right? And I thought that's what it means to me to be American, right? It wasn't what I thought it was many years ago, where I thought, where I have to assimilate, I have to fit into this box, I have to be what they want me to be. Or no, like, that's not what I perceive America to be, right? It is this idea where you can have so much to share about your own culture, and I've never been more connected to what I felt in my background, as my parents are from El Salvador, being Salvadoreño. I actually, my tia just 2 or 3 weeks ago taught me how to make pupusas, uh, and I just enjoyed that process. Like, I loved how food speaks to you, how music will speak to you, and that culture that you carry with you is so incredibly opening. And I want to share that with my children. And I think here at GSCP, it's been an interesting journey just being here. When I first talked to Dr. Mina Montes, doing this, and she, the word success was uncomfortable for me, just because I don't know, I can't define what that is, but in the spirit of what this month is about, and being a Latino who again grew up in Inglewood and kind of fought my own culture in many ways, right? And then coming full circle and just accepting who I am, and just loving the fact that I can now share it with my kids, and share it with family, and really feeling comfortable in my own skin, in a time where, interesting enough, like, uh, like I said, this new era has sort of opened up, like, a time where, like, oh well, this would have been great like 10 years ago, but now not so much, right? But I don't care. I love it, and I feel very at peace with it. I will also mention my last picture here is, I think there's still a lot of growing and learning to do. I'm at Pepperdine. I feel it's a wonderfully diverse workplace, but I also feel many times like, what am I doing here? Like, there's these, like, brilliant individuals, these brains who are sitting here. I'll be at a staff meeting or a faculty meeting, and it's just like, what am I doing? Like, I seriously feel sometimes very much out of place. there's that, what's that, imposter syndrome that's called sometimes, where like, do I really belong here? Do I fit in here? And there's still, that's part of my journey, right? Trying to, and I think part of that's because, this is still the system. The system is still there. The system hasn't gone away, and you still have to fit yourself in the system, right? And I still sometimes feel like I have to act a certain way to be accepted and make sure, like, don't go beyond these lines. These are the lines that you can stay with, right? And so, that's still something for me to grow on and to really consider and think about, especially now with kids and what I do professionally and the example that I set for them. So yeah, so that's been my journey. So I'm really excited where the future holds. My kids are gratefully, our oldest is in a dual immersion Spanish program where he's learning Spanish. Even though we speak it here and he understands it, but the speaking was trouble. And I just felt it's so important, so critical to just keep this alive, and understanding who we are. And it just opens so many doors, and I'm very excited about that future, with my family, and just excited too about, finally being at a place where I know who I am. And even though, again, there's work to be done, in particular, feeling accepted and trying to work within the boxes that still exist, I'm still very much believing that I can make a difference, that I can make a change, as particularly in education with future teachers that we work with. And there's nobody who forces you to be in a box. You can make a difference with who you are and being yourself. And I think that's such an important aspect, right? Because we don't all fit in this box. And sometimes I feel like that's how I grew up. I grew up in like thinking this box is the way you're successful and that's it. And come to realize that that's not the path for everyone, at least, right? Like, and I think that's a very important discovery for me. So, um, yeah, so I think that's it for me. Apologies if it was too long or kind of boring, but I really am grateful to Dr. Miramontes and her team for really giving me the opportunity to at least think about this. It was ultimately, again, as a Latino from Inglewood, I don't know. I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing sometimes, but it's great to just consider this and think about it, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Vigil. We're going to go to our questions now. Dr. Miramontes, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So first and foremost, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for trusting me and us, and being willing to share your story. Actually, I know that Dr. GR has a class she has to go to and she has a question, so mine can wait, because I'm here till the end. So Dr. GR, go ahead.
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to thank Ricardo for sharing his story. Thank you so much for, a lot of this stuff is personal and it's our own personal journey. So sharing it with others is hard. And I have so appreciated the folks that have stepped up and wanted to share their stories. And I just wanted to say, Dr. Vigil, that I've learned more about you in just like these last 20 minutes than I have in the time that we've been working together. So thanks so much. I have to go teach, so I'm logging off, but have enjoyed the series. So we'll see you all tomorrow at the launch.
Thank you, Dr. GR.
Thank you, Dr. GR. Have a great one. So yes. So again, thank you for trusting me and trusting us and being here and sharing your story. As a fellow Latina, I can assure you that I understand how difficult this process is. And the imposter syndrome that you described, feel it every day. I feel it every single day. I always tell my students, those that are that kind of are with me semester over semester, that every time I get ready for class, it's like I have to psych myself up, like I can do this, I know what I'm talking about, I belong here. And every single time, it doesn't matter how many times I've done this, it doesn't matter how well I know my material, it's challenging. So hearing your story, hearing how you feel, And I'm not saying that you go through that every single time, but even when you're sitting in the room and thinking, what am I doing here? I think it's very relevant. And that piece you shared about fighting against your own culture. We had another speaker last week who also spoke to the fact that he, to some degree, rejected, his Mexican side for a while, his Mexican. And I could resonate with that so much. And I don't know about anyone else in the audience, but I remember growing up, and I shared this then, so I'll share it again. But this whole idea of, I went from Gabriela to Gabrielle, and, I wouldn't tell people what my last name was because it was Lopez. And, it's like, can't get more Mexican than that with the Z at the end. Would wear green contacts, dyed my hair blonde. Although now it's purple, but that's a whole different conversation. This idea of rejection. And I agree with you. It's like, how do you fit into the American ideal of what we're meant to be? Right. And one of the things that I've always credited GSEP, and don't get me wrong, GSEP has done a lot. There's still a lot of work to do. But one of the things that I've always credited with GSEP with is that ability for me to find my voice. So I wonder, has there been, or where was your pivot? Where was your moment where things shifted for you?
Yeah, I think that especially when it comes to finding the voice, it was two things. One, and they happened almost around the same time, but having a child, and sort of recognizing, well, they're going to grow up in your environment, whatever environment you create, and you can choose to do whatever you want to do. And so what kind of environment do we want to create? But that was very much influenced by, again, the 2016 election and that movement. And I finally felt, different emotions, surprise, anger. And that sort of made me think, you know what, like, I know what I am. I know I've been, what I've done. I know I can be successful. Now I have a kid and kids now to really display it. So to me, I think that was the pivotal time period, is just, really, it's almost like, what did I say? It's like, well, you're pointing out who I am, and yeah, okay, but this is who I am, and I enjoy it, and I love it, and I love being bilingual. I love being able to understand this, and I feel bad for the folks who don't, right? And so let's do this journey together. So I think that was a big turning point for me, and finally breaking free from that box. And I was always kind of still not really mentioning it, and finally just being able to say, no, I have to get comfortable in who I am, and what my last name is, and just going through that experience, especially for my kids. And I tell them every day, pues, sos Latino, y vamos a hablar dos idiomas. We're gonna speak in English, we're gonna speak Spanish, but be proud of that. And I don't think my parents did that for me, but I feel like it's important that I do it for my kids. And I would not have had that voice a few years ago. So I think that was definitely the time period for me, that critical junction.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Miramontes. Are there any questions from the audience? You can raise your hand or use the chat function.
I have one.
Please.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Vigil. I'm Alejandra. I'm a PhD student at GSEP, and I work at Pepperdine as well. But thank you for sharing your story. It was relatable, of course. And last week, I think, like Dr. G mentioned, that theme of sometimes feeling ashamed of your own culture, even though you have family from Mexico. For me, like half my family's from there and half is from here. But it was always like you're either too American for some of your family, or you're too Mexican for the other family. And you guys probably know how it is, like being made fun of at school, but also by your own family. But thank you so much for sharing. My question for you is, now that it seems like you have a newfound appreciation of your culture, do you travel to Mexico at all? Can you share an experience? And also, does that make you want to travel different countries and gain other culture knowledge as well?
So yeah, so absolutely. We haven't done done a lot of traveling recently, but so my parents are from El Salvador, and so but my wife is Mexican. She's from Guadalajara, so we actually want to travel to both places. And yes, I think and you bring up an excellent point, right? Like you know, you're too American for one location, and you're too Latino for another location, right? But in that sort of realm, I think what I've been very comfortable with recently um, is being comfortable with that here in the United States, and just sort of figuring out, well, yes, like as a Salvadorian here, like there's a different culture even than in El Salvador, you know, and as same with my wife, her experience as a Mexican here, and being different from there, but we've created our own sort of Latino culture here, and so that's been interesting. And then in regards to just traveling, I think it's on the docket. But one of the things we do want to do is really have our kids experience what it's like to be in a place that's predominantly Spanish speaking, right? And that's something they haven't experienced yet. And I think that will be a fun thing to do with them, and something to experience. And you know, a subset to that, we also are very keen on just showing them you know, Spanish culture, like whether that be movies or shows, and definitely Spanish music, things that we are excited about, and just very, it's cool. I love it. I love just being able to share that with our kids, but also just have that, you know, I can shift from loving whatever American thing culture is happening, but I also love, you know, the Latino stuff that's happening, and watching, I don't know, I mentioned Vicente Fernández, but we watched the Luis Miguel La Serie, and that was fun, and just, you know, experience those things have been a real blessing for us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alejandra. Are there any other questions for Dr. Vigil?
So Dr. Vigil, when are you bringing some pupusas to Pepperdine?
Pretty soon, pretty soon. The one last thing I had, so my tia taught me the process of making them, but I have to learn how to make the meat. That's the actual key. So that's
Yeah.
next. So I can like form them, but the next step, hopefully in next month, she'll teach me how to do it. And after that, I will gladly share.
I love pupusas. It's funny how food just brings us together, right?
Absolutely.
Like in my family, the big thing is tamales, but anyone that made them has kind of, you know, passed already. So that skill was never transferred over.
Oh yeah.
So my sister's husband, his family still does that. And so I keep on telling him that I'm gonna invite myself over the holidays so that I can learn. Just because I don't wanna not, like, I remember, it's funny because I have a memory of everyone coming together and making tamales, and I hated it, right? It's like,
Mhm.
no, I don't want to go. I don't want to make tamales. I don't want to put the masa. You'd get all dirty, and it was just horrible. But that was, you know, child me that was thinking this, because I'd rather be outside playing with my cousins. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I should have taken advantage when I had it, right? But it's interesting how food just kind of, it's almost like the great equalizer when we
Mhm.
think about food and culture, because we all can experience each other's cultures through food.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to be looking to you. I know where you
Absolutely.
work.
Absolutely.
Looking for the pupusas.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think, you know, you know, like I said, my mom passed away recently, and I like at my tias, they're a little bit older, and I just realized now, like, boy, I'm picking their brains. I'm just like, wait, teach me this stuff, because it's so easily lost, and it's something that is such a key part of who you are and who you grew up with, but you can take it for granted, and someone's got to take the mantle, right? It doesn't, we're not passing things on as we used to, especially when you're second generation, third generation. You know, there are a lot of third, fourth generation folks here, and you just lose it at some point. And I want to hold on to it as much as possible. So I totally agree with you, and I will definitely try and make the pupusas when I get the opportunity.
I'll make my grandmother's chile. I'm the only one at this point that makes it. She used to, this woman, I mean, I give her props, but man, she made it by hand. So she used like yellow peppers and jalapenos and chile de árbol, and she mixed them all these together, and then she'd like shred it all by hand in tomato sauce. And yeah, right, whoever's made chili by hand, you know that stuff burns. And when my mom was like, you should try it, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And so I did, and I remember my hands burned for like 2 days, and it was like, I can't make it stop. I can't make it stop. And so to this day, the family's like, okay, but you have to bring the chili. That's like all we ask for. So I make these tubs of it because it disappears. Like before I know it, all the Tupperware disappears and all the chili disappears. And it's like, there's something about the food, right? It's just, that's really important as part of the culture, the language and the food. Because I'm with you. Spanish was my first language, and over time I've lost it. Not completely. I can speak Spanish, I understand it, I can have conversations, but it's always at that conversational level. Like I can't take it too far. So Sebastian, my oldest, who's gonna be 19 this year, just refused. He just had no interest. And with Cassie, we put her in a dual immersion program for that very reason. And now Sebastian's like, I should have learned. And I'm like, yeah, you should have, because now it's going to be harder, you know? And so.
And it's just, and it's so much more than just the language. It literally is a key, right? Like literally, just how literacy is important to opening up a lot of things, right? But just understanding literacy in a different language, it's a key to that culture and what that culture is about. And yes, you can still partake in it, but boy, when you understand the nuances and the puns and the jokes, and it just opens us this new level of understanding for anyone who speaks different languages. So
yeah,
it's
absolutely. Sometimes he'll come over, he goes, what does this mean? And I'm like, there's no direct translation. Like you just have to. And he'll ask me, he goes, well, how'd you learn? And I'm like, well, first it was my first language, but second, novelas. Like novelas in my grandma, because she's the one that raised me. I didn't go to preschool, novelas. And he's like, no, seriously. I'm like, seriously. And then, that's just kind of how it goes. And with him now, he's at this point where he's like, do I do it? Do I not? Do I invest the time? It's not going to be as easy. And, all that. Whereas Cassie, she doesn't talk it as well. She talks it at school, but at home, she's so used to the English language, but she can understand. Like, we can't have those conversations in Spanish that we don't want our kids to understand anymore, because she understands. And then she goes and she tells Sebastian. So it's like, okay, we got to learn a third language now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do that with our kids now, but it's going away quickly. Like, they know. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Vigil, on the subject of culture, food, family, do you have any recommendations for perhaps any books or documentaries that our guests can listen to afterward?
Boy, I wouldn't say no, not specifically, but there are things that it's funny that there was a show on Netflix called High on the Hog, and it was this documentary about a journey of literally Africans from Africa to the United States, and but again, it was the food, and so the journey was about the food and how it went, and very touching documentary, touching story. And maybe tear up at some point just to think about like just sort of the journey and the culture that was lost. But again, the food was its unifying factor with all that. So that's one small recommendation, but I would say in general, just be open to watching things about different cultures and different environments, because I do think that helps to really understand. I think what you end up understanding was we're all different, but we're all still the same. Right? At the end of the day, we're all human, right? And we experience life through different cultures and different foods. But it's such an important thing to recognize what connects us. And so, yeah, no specific I guess, things to read or watch, but, you know, High on the Hog was definitely one that is an example of something that I would always recommend folks to just be open to and experiencing.
Thank you. Absolutely. Being open to these experiences and opening ourselves to a new world and a new culture through any medium. Thank you, Dr. Vigil. We want to thank you again. And Dr. Miramontes will close us off with final remarks and upcoming events to share.
Thank you, Dr. Sonia. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. Again, I can't stress this enough, Dr. Vigil, for being here and trusting us with your story. For the rest of you, for joining us on this journey. I know today was a smaller group, but hopefully it was just as enriching and just as important as the rest of our stories so far. Please join us. We have a few more events coming up. On Friday, we have the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Reina Garcia Ramos, and she's going to be talking about being Latina within higher ed. Where we have the Day of the Dead workshop on Saturday, where we're going to be talking about the history of Day of the Dead, and then you'll be building mini altars. On Friday, we have lunch for you, so please join us. And on Saturday, we'll have refreshments. Overall, I just want to thank everyone for being here and joining us. And I invite you to continue with us along the way. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.